First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer. How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi, host of Tier Talk. So, guys, this is the first video that we're going to be trying our best, because it's me and a panel of experts here, and helping us answer those supervisory questions that we may find on an interview or a supervisory exam. Today's question is about giving those employees, those subordinates, expectations, and how do you monitor those expectations. Doesn't necessarily have to be punitive, just this is what I expect from you, and then how do you make sure they're following those expectations. So when we come back from our sponsors, we're going to give you a lot of different perspectives from a lot of different professionals in this field. And I think it's just a great video, guys. It's a lot of information, but this is one of many videos to come. This is just going to be a lot of good topics here, and these aren't easy to answer. They're not, but it's definitely worth a discussion. Can't wait to see what you guys add to it as well in the community. And guys, don't forget, guys, I do have an inmate manipulation course available. Everything's in the description. Just go in the description, click the links, and it'll give you everything you need to know on how to take that course. But it's definitely worthwhile. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you, brave men and women that work in correction. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We'll go to our sponsor, and when we come back, it's me and a panel of experts, and we're going to be discussing how do you make sure that your employees are reaching that level of expectation that you expect. How do you guide them? That's the key. All right, guys, stand by for our sponsor.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Thank you guys for listening to our sponsor. You know, a while ago, maybe a few years back, me and Michael Pataro did an episode on transformational leadership. Basically, how do you transform your subordinates into potential leaders? And that was really a good dialogue, man. You know, we came up with things like you don't want to micromanage, you want to give them levels of responsibility. And I think that kind of falls parallel with what we're discussing right now. I mean, yes, guys, there are specific expectations. I want my people to be professional. I want them to know policy and procedure, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, all right, fine. We know that. But I also believe that if this is a career and you're making it your career and you want to move up, then I also expect you to seize the opportunities when you're ready. I do. I expect that. You know, sky's the limit, guys, in this career. There's so many ways that you can go. So if I'm investing my time and trying to transform you into something higher, then when those opportunities come and you're ready to take it, I expect you guys to jump for it. I really do. I expect you guys to take that next level. But with that said, I have to be able, even as a supervisor, because again, I do believe in that transformational leadership, to give you the tools and resources needed so you're able to embrace that next level. You're able to have that ability to go forward, that knowledge that you need. So for me, in my career, guys, I've always been surrounded by good people. Whether I chose to be around them or they just happen to be there, that's kind of a question for the ages, but I've been lucky. The people that I've been surrounded by have motivated me to take that next step. And in some cases, they would come up and say, Gans, you're going to be a leader one day. You know, I'm putting you on this high level here, Gans. You're going to be a leader. And that motivated me. So I think in return, if I had to guide people onto that path to meet that expectation of being that next leader, if they chose to be that, then not only would I have to give them the tools and resources, but I would also like to make sure that they're surrounded by positive people who will go ahead and reinforce that expectation. Remind that person that they can achieve such goals. That's the key. If they want to pursue education, because maybe that's needed. Then I want to make sure that they're surrounded by people that support that. I want to make sure that they're put in an environment that's positive, that motivates them to move forward. And I mean, the last thing I would want is to give somebody the want to do something, because this is the want. I'm not talking about the need. This is their want to do something, but not be able to put them in an environment where they can achieve it. I think that's just not a fair balance. So I think for me, and this is kind of keeping it quick, but that higher level expectation, because I'm about helping people. I'm about, like, if you want that moment, grab that moment. It's yours. Take it. If you want to be a correctional supervisor, obviously learn what you can. And I promise you guys, if I'm able to do it, I'll put you in an environment where you can learn everything. You can get a taste of just about everything. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's the resources I got to give you. That's the tools I got to give you. That's the knowledge, the information. But I want to put you in an environment that's conducive. That's how I guide you, by putting you in an environment that supports where it is that you want to be. They don't look at it as a challenge, or that they don't embrace you wanting to be there. They reinforce your want. They motivate you. And if you feel like you can't do it, they're behind you, pushing you forward anyway, because you're going to have those moments. So I guess for any supervisor, at least from my perspective, and we're talking about higher level expectations, then the best guidance I can give you would be to make sure that you're in an environment that supports those higher level expectations. To make sure I surround you with people that support you. And I think that's key. But that's my perspective. It's not all inclusive. There's a lot more here. But I wasn't leaning toward the punitive side. I was focusing more on the positive. Because the punitive side's a whole other different ball game. That's where the expectations are job specific. And that's where guiding them is kind of like a last resort, because if they fail at that point, they're looking at getting disciplined. I wanted to be more the positive route. That higher level expectation. If you want to achieve greatness, this is how you can do it. This is the level I'll put you on. But I want to make sure you're surrounded by people that can reinforce that. An environment that's conducive to that. But, yeah, that's my perspective. What do you got, Russ?
Hey there, everyone. Russ Hamilton here from Keepers of Chaos. Anyway, Anthony sent me over the burning question of the week, as it were, which is, how do you set expectations and guide your correctional staff down the road to success? All right. So that, though, in this particular situation is just one element of the question, because this is done from the viewpoint of answering this as part of an interview that you're giving in order to try and promote to a supervisory position. All right. So the real question here is actually about your vision and how you're going to be able to take that leap upward to go from just being on that bottom rung to being able to supervise people and being able to grow them, to mature them, and be able to make them into better officers. So I think that the whole thing is that when you talk about setting expectations, I've had those particular supervisors that they always, take that so very literally. They're going to set their expectations from you. And it's kind of a top-down process to them, where they think that, what, they're laying down the law and they're telling you what they expect. And by golly, you better do it. Now, there's a legitimate element to that, but I think that viewpoint misses the bigger picture. It's really important when you're going to go in there to your interview to get across how you are going to grow your staff, how you are going to set your expectations, what those expectations are going to be, and how you're going to be an asset to the whole supervisory staff by the type of personnel that you're able to cultivate. All right. So when I went in and when I did my interview, I just took in with me a very simple philosophy, and I called it in my mind. And I did run this down to them too. On the outside, I just called it STOPP, STOPP, all right? Supervision, training, observation, policy, and procedure. And, I just basically told them that my view of what I should be bringing to my staff members was being able to show and train them, right? So I start with that supervision, which is the S, and then T, training, because the training is so important, and being able to put them in the position where they're able eventually to carry out what I'm showing them. And that training runs the whole gamut, of course. But for me, it was especially important because I always wanted to be, that safety and security guy. So I did a lot of training with my personnel on, how to spot where contraband is going to be or might be, and how to follow through with those procedures. And also, I talked a lot to them about, fulfilling what their element of that particular project should be. You've always got one guy who maybe he's a little better at spotting which inmates are involved in the STGs. Maybe you've got one person that's a little better at coordinating a raid that you're going to pull off, or any number of those things. Play to their strengths and then make them learn also the other elements of it. And so this is what I would try and get across to those individuals who are asking you this question. Make your expectations be that these individuals that you're nurturing along, that they're growing and that they're becoming better at whatever they do. So you want to take their strengths, which they've already got, and branch those out. You've got your individual who's maybe, good with gangs, good with the culture of the yard, that kind of thing. But you also want to, influence him by directing him towards someone else in your little crew that might be, exceptionally good at report writing. And when you do these things, what happens is you're able to build morale, right? You're able to build teamwork. And when morale and teamwork flourish under good supervision and individuals that you're able to motivate, well, that makes for a safer, more secure unit. And you're able to, really impact all of those things that you want to do. So this is the way you have to get those things across to the individuals that are asking you a question like this. And essentially what it boils down to is, what is your vision? How do you expect to be able to carry out this, to be able to set those expectations, what they are, and to be able to cultivate the new talents that you're developing below you. So just kind of running real quick through my whole acronym and what it means, STOPP, that's supervision, training, observation, policy, and procedure. It's real simple. S, supervision, self-explanatory. T, training. You're going to train your people. O, observation. You're going to observe your people. You're going to observe the inmates. You're going to observe everything in your area. And you're going to translate that into your supervision. Back to the start there. And then policy and procedure. All right. Writing it, developing it, taking it and just basically polishing it up. Sometimes you're going to have to renovate those policies and procedures. You're also going to have to take policies and procedures as new ones come down and train them to your staff. Show them how to use that policy and procedure. Or sometimes you might have to teach them how to mitigate problems that come along, because sometimes, as we know, sometimes our policy and procedure doesn't really jive with the real world. But there's ways that you can take and show them how to make it more efficient and how to, work on the fly with things like that. And so that's it. STOPP. It's a great concept to take into an interview with them, all right? So anyway, this is Russ Hamilton. I hope you've taken this to heart. I hope I brought you something interesting and useful that you can use anytime you're going into an interview situation like this. All right. Everyone stay safe, stay frosty, stay aware. This is Russ Hamilton. I'm signing out.
Welcome, guys. Retired Major Louis Soto here. Interesting question that I was asked to try to answer for you today. And that is to provide an example of a time where I set expectations of my subordinates and kind of followed through and monitored their progress. I wanted to share with you one of my first ones. I know that I was just a first-line supervisor, a sergeant, which is the first-line supervisor here in New Jersey in the Department of Corrections. and I was assigned to a stabilization unit as one of my units. And that stabilization unit is one of the units where special needs inmates go. Those individuals that are under psychiatric care or under psychotropic medications. Sometimes we know these individuals will decompensate, and they send them to this stabilization unit, which is a nice close custody unit that is manned by medical staff 24/7, and the psychiatrists, psychologists are there and make tours and rounds, and they actually try to stabilize the unit or the individual, the inmate, and try to get them back to their normalcy, by trying to give them some therapy, trying to give them more medication, getting them on the medication maybe that they weren't taking. So this was the type of unit that the correctional officers will get a little bit more specialized training on how to treat individuals that are, not in their right mental state. So as I'm touring this unit as a brand new supervisor, I love to read. I'm a policy and procedures type of guy. I actually ask my officers to read their post orders and to make sure that we're following them. And my expectations of them is to follow them to a T, not to deviate. And as I'm touring that unit one day, I see that they're bringing out inmates to be interviewed or be seen for therapy purposes with the psychologist on the unit, and that it's a close custody unit, so when they come out of their cell, they have to be handcuffed, and they were being handcuffed in the front, put their hands out through the food port, get them handcuffed, open the door, and get them out. And then take them over to the psychiatrist or psychologist or medical personnel, whoever is going to see them. They would take them into their office, sit them in front of them, maybe 5, no more than 10 feet away from them, as they're being interviewed, evaluated, or whatever the case may be. So you would think that there was nothing wrong with that, except the fact that our post orders and our policies ask us to handcuff inmates from the rear, handcuff inmates with their hands in their back. Reason being because it actually helps us in safety precautionary measures, where a person who's handcuffed in the back cannot bring their hands forward to try to attack, try to hit, try to strangle or anything of the sort, while with your hands handcuffed to the front, you have a lot more play, you have a lot more leeway, more mobility with your bodies and your arms to, God forbid, attack a person. So I asked my officers, why did they practice this and why did they deviate from the post orders, and say, well, the medical department or the psychs have asked us for a couple of reasons. One of them mainly being having a person that's decompensating feel as comfortable as possible, knowing that they still have to be restrained by being handcuffed. So I said, well, that reason makes a little sense, but why else? Secondly, they said, well, because the psych department or the psychologist or psychiatrist may want to talk to an individual, get them to open up, and they said that a person kind of feels more forthcoming if they feel more comfortable and they're not sitting there not pacing, but moving in the chair back and forth because of the uncomfortability of having their hands basically restrained from the back and having their hands behind them. I said, okay, well, unfortunately, it's actually putting us in a very precarious situation, because we are now violating policy that can, in fact, God forbid something were to happen where this inmate would get up and try to assault staff or assault the individual medical staff, we would have to justify why we did what we did. So I asked my officers not to do that anymore, that to continue to practice as the post orders state, follow the post orders, and that I would follow up and try to come to a resolution on this issue. I was able to set up a meeting with the psychs and the medical department and the heads of the medical department so we can talk about this issue. And they reiterated the facts that, a person that is a special needs individual who's decompensating and they're trying to treat them would feel more comfortable with the hands to the handcuffed to the front. I expressed to them the different issues and concerns that we had, and they understood. and they said, well, you know, is there anything we can do to come to a happy medium? Now, you may know that as a first-line supervisor or sergeant, you may not have too much influence or input into how policies get driven or written, or where more a first-line supervisor does the enforcement, making sure that we're following the policies and directives that come from above. But I was able to go a step further and have meetings with my chief, with the administrative lieutenant, explain to them the issues and the concerns with the medical staff and our correctional officers, and how we need to come up with a happy medium. And in fact, I was very happy to be able to be instrumental in getting something changed. Expecting my officers to follow the policy, but we were able to come up with a happy medium where the inmate was going to be cuffed to the front with their hands in front of them with handcuffs, but with the assistance of a belt that goes around their waist that has a D-ring that the handcuffs can be placed in. So that way they have the handcuffs in the front, but they don't have the free mobility to try to attack someone by hitting them, striking them, or strangling them, or anything of the sort. That way they can sit in a chair in that meeting with the psychiatrist, psychologist, medical personnel, with their hands in the front without being uncomfortable, but yet we're still following policy that was changed in the post orders and the policies for the facility. So I found that being instrumental in changing the post orders, listening to my staff, right, and expecting them to follow the post orders to the T, whether it's there's a reason why we write the things down, why we come up with directives, why we come up with policies, and usually is driven by incidents that occur in our institutions. And now, by knowing that all situations, circumstances can be covered by policy, using sometimes common sense and working along with the medical staff, and that's how we got to do. We got to work together to accomplish goals. You know, the medical staff have to accomplish their goals in stabilizing this individual, and us, as the correctional officers and the correctional staff, need to accomplish our goals as far as security and safety of the institution. I think that that was a great example that helped me in the rest of my career, because it showed that, hey, I have my officers back, but I also had the overall institutional goals in place. So I hope this gave you a great example of how you can have expectations and have your staff accomplish them by monitoring and even having their back. I know there will be plenty more questions coming forward. I look forward to answering and dealing and talking with you about them. Enjoy yourselves. God bless.
So hello everyone, I'm Darryl Smith. Anthony asked me to put together a short video on the topic of what expectations of subordinates, and what guidance and direction did you find to be most effective. So for me, I like to be pretty clear to my subordinates. I prefer to let them know as much detail as possible when it comes to expectations. But of course this depends on the situation. Normal everyday stuff, you don't really have to give them too much instruction. Don't need to be involved as a micromanager. They're already aware of the policy and procedures. So my feeling is that the clearer I am on the expectations we have for them, the better results that we're going to receive. If I'm not clear on what I expect and I say, just go for it, who knows what we could end up with. All kinds of different results. And that's why the details matter, because you want the results to be the same. But that's why most agencies have policies and procedures in place to help eliminate some of the confusion on expectations. Every agency and department have rules that they expect their staff to follow. So those are usually pretty clearly defined as well. For example, when given direction subject that is an established daily routine, not much direction needs to be given, except for maybe some small minor details that may be specific to that exact occurrence or situation. If it happens to be a new procedure, I'm going to assign someone that has already shown they can handle a situation or a task presented to them and complete it successfully. And of course I'll make the expectations clear for what we're looking for. As a supervisor, again, you don't have to have all the details or all the answers. you have to be open to get feedback from your subordinates. I'll tell them if any problems come up that we haven't already planned on or haven't already outlined, call me, come see me. And then if after the task is completed, I'll ask them, how did it go? Do we have any problems? If you had a problem, how did you handle it? If there's anything we can do in the future to avoid this problem, give me your feedback. Let me know, what you think. And then we'll establish how to move forward from there. Taking their perceptions and their ideas into account helps build confidence in them and strengthens the relationship of trust that is needed between a supervisor and the subordinates. As a manager or supervisor, you have to have a supervisor that you report to, and their perception of you as a leader is partially based on the effectiveness of your team. You need your subordinates to trust that you will be fair and honest with them, which leads me to the attributes of a good leader. Being fair and honest is key. You need to be a good decision maker. Stick to your decisions. No waffling back and forth. Treat staff equally as much as you can without showing favorites. Motivate your staff. Encourage them to provide their best each and every day. Mentor them, coach them towards self-improvement through trainings. Encourage them to development, their own individual self-development plans. What kind of trainings can they take, either inside the agency or outside the agency, to develop themselves? Be a mentor. Lead by positive example. If you need to get in there and get your hands dirty, your subordinates are definitely going to appreciate that and respect you for it. So that's my thoughts on that topic. Thank you.
Hi, Connie Alleyne here from the Civilian Corrections Academy. The question today was really, what's an example of a way that you've effectively managed a subordinate, and what's some of the guidance that you've provided? I think this is a great question because managing in corrections can be very challenging. And, this is kind of a way of creating our own best practices. So from a civilian perspective, as a health services administrator, it can be very challenging because there's so many protocols that we need to follow. I think in general in corrections, there's tons of protocols and different directives that need to be followed. But from a healthcare perspective, you've got all these healthcare protocols, all these precautions, all these best practices that are out there. What are the standards of care that we should be following? And my example is I had this nurse new to corrections come in, and literally she was practicing nursing as if she was out in the community. And so at first it was I left it to the nursing supervisor because that's her wheelhouse, right? That's within her scope. But as I began to do chart audits and I began to do audits of her work in general, like sharp counts, and is she signing off on things? And when she does meds, what was she doing in that process? And was she following the protocols that were established? And found that she just wasn't. And that's not because the supervisor wasn't providing her guidance. It's just that one supervisor, X amount of nurses on a busy day, it can be very challenging for that supervisor to kind of find that one needle in the haystack that's not quite functioning properly. So as I began to identify things that I knew had broader implications, I decided that I was going to work with her one-on-one to first identify some of her challenges and really understand why she may not be doing certain things. And so it turned out she really just did not understand why certain expectations were so important in the environment, right? So at the time, the organization I worked with didn't have an electronic health record. And so it was imperative that our clinical staff did all of their documentation in the clinical notes in the health record, because then we had no record of that exchange for the day or that interaction. And having been in the field for a while, you understand that all you need is for something to go awry with a particular offender, and you be the last person to have seen that offender, but you not document why you saw them, what was the treatment recommended, or what actions you took to address whatever the offender's issue, and what the follow-up actions were going to be. And in this case, this particular nurse, she would see tons of people. She didn't document anything. She had like a call down sheet that she used, where she would put notes on the side of the call down sheet so it could kind of jog her memory. And at the end of her shift, she would end up trying to document everything. And while that might work some places, in other places that doesn't work, right? And so the expectation was that there was real-time data entry into the health record. So first thing I did was, one, give her some training, because we did have trainings available, like in-service training, formal in-service training for documentation. The next thing that I did was I sat with her and I talked to her about some of the legal implications that exist in documentation, whether she documented or not documented. I talked about what impact her not documenting would have on a particular individual's care when the next staff or team of nurses came on. So if I don't know you've already provided this level of care to the offender, and then I come in and I'm doing treatment from the wrong step of continuation, you're kind of putting your other staff at risk, because they are not following the protocol, but they don't even know what they should be doing because they're following up based on the last note that's in the record. And for us, of course, that's a big deal, right? And then I kind of just sat with her and went through the process. So what does appropriate documentation look like? What does it look like? What should it include? And how much effort you need to put into it. And I get it. So, you know, nurses are balancing this act of trying to see every patient on that list, trying to document everything, trying to make sure like they're not leaving any equipment or any medications around. So I get it. It's a balancing act. And with the busyness of the day and the constant disruptions, so like, you're in the middle of doing something and then there's a code, or you're in the middle of doing something and then you get pulled because your support is needed somewhere else. I get it can be very challenging. And so I think the takeaway as I sat with her was, you have to constantly make sure that you are covering yourself, you are protecting yourself. There's no way that as administrator I can protect you when there's nothing documented. And it's great if I can actually see your encounter form or your call down log for the day, but that's not the official record of what you did for or with an offender. I think the next thing that was really the key was, after I provided like these different levels of support to her, like one-on-one support, it was following back up with her. It was going back and re-auditing to make sure like the things that we addressed were actually being addressed in the notes, that when I picked up her notes, I reviewed it. I was very clear on why she met with that offender, what she did with and for that offender, and what the follow-up steps were. If she provided any medical intervention, what that was. And in doing so, was the protocols being followed as she provided her level of intervention. And if something needed to be escalated, did she contact the physician? Did she set up an appointment with the physician? Like, so it's like all these I's that have to be dotted and T's that have to be crossed, especially on the medical side of the house, as well as the mental health side of the house. I think for me, it's understanding that, you know, corrections can be very unforgiving, right? Some mistakes are just unforgivable. And, you know, from an administrative perspective, it is, have I checked all my boxes, right? I've identified there was a knowledge gap. did I provide any intervention? What support did I provide that employee? And was the employee receptive? You know, and not I did one thing, what kinds of things that I did? Because we know everyone learns differently, right? So you can't just jump and take action when maybe this person didn't quite get it the way you explained it, you know? So here it is, this particular situation, the nurse had not only the nursing supervisor provide support, but she had the administrator provide support and had like official training on this area where we identified there was a gap. I think what this also does from a administrative perspective or from a supervisory perspective is that it shows other employees that you have an interest in their learning, right? It shows them that you aren't just looking at, you know, when something goes wrong, right? We're saying, let's look at how you're developing as an employee. Let's look at how we can support you, and we're going to provide you with that support. And this is way before you're moving towards any corrective action plan or any progressive disciplinary plan. This is just straight day-to-day work. How do I provide support to this particular employee? And how do we make sure that in not providing support, that we're not leaving that person out there like to dry? Like no trial by fire happens, or it shouldn't happen anyway. So that's my example of when I provided support to a subordinate and how I kind of monitored it. All right, Connie Alleyne, Civilian Corrections Academy, signing out.